Hi. I had promised at some point I was going to share some of my personal experiences when I first started doing Dharma. So today I'd like to talk about my first Mahayana teacher, Philip Kaplo Roshi. When I was, we're going back to 1970, I was 25 years old, and I had, I had studied a little bit with the Theravada monks of Washington, D.C., including the Venerable Nepula Guranatana, who has now become a national figure in the practice of meditation. But generally, I was a graduate school studying psychology, and I wanted to, not even interested in Buddhism specifically, but I wanted to know, to find a good teacher of meditation. And I'll tell you, at those times it was hard, and I ran into some real crazy people. I won't talk about their beliefs because I'll probably offend somebody. But suffice it to say that one night I remember it was raining in D.C. and I went to these people's house and started listening to the discussion. In the middle of it, I couldn't stand it anymore, and I walked out. And it was raining, and I wasn't driving, and I had to catch the bus in the middle of a rainy night. But I was happy to get out of there. But anyhow, the Three Pillars of Zen was a book at that time. One of the few I felt authentic books. Up-to-date books on Dharma and meditation. And it had some meditation instructions, some very good illustrations too. It was written by Philip Kaplo Roshi. Roshi had been a translator at the trials in Japan, the war crime trials. He had lived in Japan before that as a Zen student. Then was placed in a camp during the war. Also with H.R. Blythe, the writer, I believe, of the, a book on the koans, Rockcliffe Records or something like that. I can't remember the name of the book. R.H. Blythe, also a poet. In any case, he received transmission from Harada Roshi and Yasutani Roshi, I believe Yasutani directly, and founded the Denver Zen Center. So I managed to, at age 25, I was in graduate school. No, before I entered graduate school, actually. I talked to them. I found they had a training program for the summer. So one summer, it was a 6-week training program. I carried my gigantic duffel bag with all the clothes I own in my back and showed up to Rochester having registered. The first thing was they told me, well, you were enrolled for the previous 6-week program, not this program, but that was not a problem. They worked me in, and got to, be in close contact with Roshi. That's a blessing at the beginning of my training. Fairly strict training. Up in the morning for morning meditation, 5 to 7, I believe. 7 breakfast, 8 work, to noon I think lunch, and then some meditation or meditation lunch. Then at 5, quit, and 3 times a week meditation, 7 to 9. I managed to be exempted from the afternoon sessions. Well, that was afterwards, so that was my second summer. So let me go back to when I was in training. I remember a character, most outstanding character for me in Rochester was Hugh Curran, a former Benedictine monk who was now a head monk of the Zen Center, Canadian. So he would speak with an accent like this, and I didn't recognize Canadian accents at that time. I didn't realize, but there were quite a few Canadians at the Rochester Zen Center. Not surprisingly, it's way up north. So in any case, Hugh was quite a character and taught me quite a lot, actually more than Roshi directly. And that's been the case with many of my experiences, that some of the senior students have been better or at least closer teachers than the teacher. But I remember when I showed up with my big duffel bag and Hugh looks at me and says, well, that proves how much you can accumulate even in one lifetime. And I remember another time we were washing dishes, and of course Zen is kind of militaristic, or, very go into it. So the water was very hot, burning hot. And I was saying, we should get gloves here to do the dishwashing. And he said, this is how it should be. You need to meet life without gloves. Another time, we were painting a house. Again, the gloves come up. Says, we should get gloves here to do the painting so we don't get hands all painted up. He says, sometimes I like to take some of these trainees and dunk their head into a bucket of paint. So, kind of not very in a way, but Q was a great guy. I loved the guy. He later left the Zen Center a couple of years later, which in fact precipitated my leaving the Zen Center because I felt his leadership was essential to me. I remember another time the Zen Center had a beautiful backyard kind of with some little stream and some rocks, kind of Japanese, semi-Japanese style. And once in a while we had little parties, very quiet parties, very Zen circumspect parties. But there was ice cream, and at that time we didn't know anything about sugar being bad for you or the fats. And I was just saying, boy, love ice cream. It's so fattening, but just love it. And Roshi comes out and says, well, that's the price you pay for having a body. Little stories like that are priceless. And the last one I say, I was doing Dokusan, which is the interview with the master, during a sesshin. I think it was only a 3 or 4 day sesshin. But in any case, I say to Roshi, I'd like to, is it the same if you become enlightened? Is it the same if you become enlightened old or young? Says, yes, it makes no difference. Age does not exist in enlightenment. Hi. Hi, yes. Then I said, well, if somebody, I know we try here with, the koan and pushing for enlightenment. What if somebody is, likes more of the gradual approach and would like to take 20 years to become enlightened? Would that be okay? He says, well, if you've got 20 years, and he laughs, you can do it that way. So later, we're on the floor, we're all sitting on the floor, and he goes to give this talk, and what does he talk about? Well, he talks about those people who have a hard time committing themselves fully, who may wish to take 20 years to become enlightened, if they have 20 years, meaning, he was already 60 at that time. And everybody laughs, and there was I sitting thinking, oh crap, he's talking about me. Anyway, that's some of the stories of the Zen Center. Quite disciplined. We used to, work during the day. We were told not to speak too much, only functional talk. They called it, only talk about what you need to talk about to do your job. Look ahead, about 6 feet ahead when you walk. So it all began to be a little depressing for me. However, I did enter graduate school. I remember again interviewing and saying, Roshi, what do you think? I'm thinking of going into social work. And he said, social work is made for Zen. Hi. Yeah. Again, he does that Japanese thing. And I went to social work. So my second year in social work, or I say the break in the summer, I went back to the Zen Center and stayed there for 3 more months. I had roommates. I stayed in an apartment, in a house, a shared house. Great experience. Again, my peers teach me as much or more than the main teacher, but it all kind of follows, and instead of everything kind of flows from the head teacher, so it's the atmosphere teaches. That was the beginning of my practice, and I practiced with the Zen Center for 3 years. Very strong practice, as they said, and I'm glad I had that strong foundation, even though it became a little bit depressing, a little bit difficult for me and restrictive, and it was the right decision to leave because I found, Tibetan Buddhism, it's more expansive and a little more spacious and social and a little more humor and noisy and colorful, and it did fit better for me, but I'm very happy to have had that foundation. So anyway, with that I leave you. Tashidele, that's the story of